All right, would you believe it? Would you believe it? We're live. It's been quite some time since we've been live. But sometimes I come across an article or a video or a thought or something that's so meaty that I can't really break it up into a small part to make a video on. Let me make sure that this is actually live. It is. So I will send this out really quick. Okay. Should be good. So, as I was saying, sometimes I find an article or something about a topic like third-party relations or third-party relations, ooh, or something, and it applies to Sony or applies to Microsoft. Usually it applies to both. This one is entitled Sony's Third-Party Plan to Make PlayStation the Best Place to Play. And there's so much in here that trying to do a video and upload it or edit it is going to be difficult, so I decided to just go live and talk about this because I think it's a really interesting article. And it starts off by saying, as Sony Interactive Entertainment's head of third-party portfolio and acquisitions, Shawnee Benson is in a good position to trace the platform holders' evolving strategies when it comes to, in her words, making PlayStation the best place to play. It goes on to give a bit of history. She's been with Sony in a portfolio role since 2017, took over the current title in 2021. So, quote, it says, in the time that I joined and I was watching my predecessor manage the team, he was really focused on driving value for the masses and our PS4 audience, and also really focused on PlayStation VR. And a lot of partnerships were really about driving engagement on the platform. So the type of games we brought would tell that breadth and depth story and also showcase some of the innovations on PlayStation 4. Since then, there have been other people who have taken the role, and I've seen the evolution within that time frame. And the shift really focused and moved over to content acquisitions from a future technologies perspective. So we were really focused in on trying to drive a lot of excitement around the launch of PlayStation 5 and making PlayStation 5 be the best place to play. A lot of content we would focus on evolved based on that. So she goes on to say, quote, in the past, we would look at things that were closer to release because they were known quantities and so forth. The way I lead my team now is a lot more future thinking and thinking about what does the next 3 to 5 years look like from a gaming perspective. One of the biggest splashes a platform holder can make on the third-party front is exclusivity. And while we rarely see fully exclusive third-party games in the AAA space these days, third parties, because it wouldn't be a good fit in a lot of cases for a variety of reasons, there's room for exclusives. This is important here, but I thought where it applies to PlayStation and Xbox as well. There's room for exclusives where it makes sense, obviously. But really the focus, especially with a digital distribution model, is more prevalent than in generations past. The digital distribution is a lot more prevalent today than it was in the past, and I completely lost my place, is that there are different types of gameplay out there. For example, a free-to-play game's business model is most successful when it's on as many platforms as possible and brings the biggest audience possible. So that's something really important there. So when you talk about exclusivity, not necessarily free-to-play games should be exclusive because they require, by definition, a large audience. However, there are some games that benefit from exclusivity, and that's what she's talking about. She's talking about differentiating between the two, not lumping everything into one category. So as Sony assesses opportunities, it's often less about securing exclusivity as it is about making the PlayStation version stand out as the one to get. And this is where I actually agree, because I found myself purchasing a lot of third-party games recently. Even if they're in Game Pass, I purchase them on PlayStation. And the reason isn't because, I'm an idiot or I don't want a game for quote-unquote free with a subscription service. It's because they're taking advantage of unique features. I love the DualSense controller. I like when they take advantage of the haptics. I like when they use that little speaker in there. It's more immersive. I enjoy that. And that's what she's talking about. So she says, So that's the thinking about it, less around exclusivity than what kind of technologies could they adopt that really make PlayStation 5 sing. What kind of innovation can they apply with the haptics and the DualSense or the adaptive triggers? What could they do with 3D audio and the sound design of a game? So there's a lot of things we could do and then create marketing stories around. And that's where some of the partnerships for multi-platform games really focus. So what she's saying is that a lot of times it's easier for them to get a third-party deal. Obviously, it's easier when you have more consoles out there sold. People want to sell to the highest market possible. But when they have these extra features and they market them well or they pitch them well to these studios, sometimes that aids in getting that exclusivity deal with a third party. Benson notes that Sony doesn't specifically pay for adoption of DualSense features, for example, but if the team believes it's a good PlayStation story, then they would work on a partnership that could include marketing or development support. So that's what I'm talking about right there. If they feel that a game, for instance, say it's a shooter or say it's some sort of Twitch-based gameplay, and you have different weapons, and they feel that using the DualSense haptic feedbacks and adaptive triggers would really aid in the immersion of that game or tell that story better, then they'll pitch that and they'll market it to that third-party team, and maybe a partnership will be formed. When Benson is looking at Sony's third-party strategy for the next 3 to 5 years, she's also looking at PlayStation VR 2 over that span. And while competitive concerns about other consoles may help shape the PlayStation 5 strategy, Benson says it's a very different situation in VR. We definitely are still in this rising tide helps all ships mindset for the VR ecosystem. So it's not the same kind of competitive landscape as it is, say, in the console space. Kind of flat gaming experience, she says. So it's interesting, where the rising tide lifts all boats in VR, there's not a lot of competition there. Everyone's trying to get that market off the ground, so they're all working together. Whereas in the console space, it's not a rising tide lifts all ships. It's very competitive, and they want their system to sell over other systems. That's not to say that PSVR strategy is the same as that of its predecessor. Benson joined PlayStation in the original PSVR's launch window and says she can see how clearly it has evolved. Quote, in the original PlayStation VR launch window, it was still trying to sell the promise of why to develop for VR. Now we have this community of much more seasoned creators, teams like Polyarc and Dreams and so forth, that are dedicated studios to the VR space. I think both sides, Meta and PlayStation, have really put a lot of investment into these studios to make sure we still can tell that story from a technology perspective, because there's still a lot of belief in that experience. And when it comes to VR, I'm definitely into VR. I can't describe VR. It's hard to describe it. It's even hard to show it, even when you stream it, because it's so immersive. That is the hook for VR. I see a lot of people talking about, VR needs its killer app. VR needs this killer app. It's not about the individual game that pulls you in. It's not like saying, the PlayStation 2's killer app is Metal Gear Solid 2, or the PlayStation 5's killer app is Horizon Forbidden West or Spider-Man 2. With VR, it's about putting the headset on and the experience. The experience is the killer app. You can't quantify the experience. You can't whittle it down to one game. At least that's my opinion. The goal now is to keep that developer community thriving, and that means the company takes a different angle towards its VR partnerships. Quote, it's around how we can best support you to be able to bring that content over to PlayStation VR 2. And that can be development funding support to marketing support, because a lot of these studios don't necessarily have the same kind of marketing infrastructure as a bigger publisher would. And if you look at the two platforms, they're very different experiences, and they all kind of have their own space for it. And that's what I was talking about. It's a different experience than console gaming. You can't really say, I need a killer app for VR before I try it, because the killer app is the virtual space that you're in. It's That's the experience. That's the killer app. It's an experience that you can't get on a traditional console. That's different again from the way Sony views the PC as a platform for third-party relationships. So this is why I really like this article, because it separates console, VR, PC, and you see the different approaches. It's not all just one market. It's not 2 billion gamers and we can reach them all by doing the exact same thing in every single market. Sony views the PC as a platform for third-party relationships and exclusivity purposes. The PC ecosystem is obviously more developed than that of VR, but Sony isn't taking the same competitive approach to it as with consoles when it comes to its third-party deals. Quote, when we look at partnerships, we're looking at how we can support both the partner and the platform. Our mindset is we want to make sure the partner can keep the lights on and generate revenue in other channels. And from my perspective, it's really important for gamers to have choice and variety of opportunity in places to play. And PC is really not in the same kind of competitive space for us, at least currently. So it's not really a thing we focus on when we look at partnerships. If you look at a lot of our indie partners, that's a great opportunity for generating revenue on their side and our side as well. While AAA partnerships might get the most attention from the outside world, Benson stresses the importance of smaller developers to Sony. Quote, they're the lifeblood to our platform. I certainly have a lot of personal attachment to it. If I'm not even wearing a Sony hat, that's my community. Those are the people I was born and raised in the game industry with. I have a huge affinity for that, and it's what got me into the games industry in the first place. From a content strategy standpoint, it is absolutely a priority for us. The AAA obviously has a lot of commercial return and value, and the indie games also offer innovation and things that influence AAA down the line because they take more risks and there are more types of mechanics they incorporate. She mentions Before Your Eyes, which relies on eye tracking and uses blinking as a game mechanic. And this is, again, the differentiating factor. The DualSense controller implemented in third-party games can lead to more sales of that game on the PlayStation, even though some of those third-party games are in services. So with PlayStation VR 2, the importance of using the features like eye tracking, like the haptic feedback, that leads to adoption of games in the VR space. Where were we? The game has been released on PC and mobile and is expected to launch for PlayStation VR later this year. So with that one game, there are other games that are taking a different approach to each market. The game's coming out on PC. The game came out on mobile, but once it comes to PlayStation VR 2, it's utilizing the PlayStation-centric features that make it stand apart in that market, and that's their approach. Quote, these types of things are so imaginative and so different and so important to the ecosystem of gaming and the types of content we create on our platform. So it's very important, Benson says. Also, our audience is becoming more and more diverse than ever, and having a more diverse creative pool bringing content to our platform is very much a focus for me and our team at large. She adds, we see value in all types of games, and it is a wide spectrum. We don't try to relegate them to an indie corner. They are sitting alongside the biggest of the games. Look at Stray, look at Kana, look at Sifu. Those games are revered as some of the biggest types of IPs for PlayStation 5, and those were created by indie teams, so it's very much a priority for us and continues to be. This isn't the first time Sony has wooed and showcased indie developers. They were also a key part of the PlayStation 4's early success, and devoting a segment of its 2013 E3 show to indies ahead of the system's launch. But Sony's relationship with small developers frayed over the course of the PS4's lifespan, with indies in recent years pointedly criticizing the company for poor communication, lack of promotion, and not letting them participate in sales events. In a session at GI Live London last year, Sony's chief indie liaison, Shuhei Yoshida, acknowledged that the company had shifted its focus too much to the AAA side of things late in the PlayStation 4 generation. Benson is confident Sony won't repeat that mistake this generation, in part because Sony restructured its PlayStation business a few years back to replace regional US, European, and Japanese branches with a single globalized operation. She said, quote, "There is a bigger bench than ever in terms of the dedicated support and team. One of the differences in the PS4 generation was we were a regionally operated team, so there wasn't this cross-functional level of care and support that we were even equipped to do because there weren't resources available to support it." She says now there's a significantly sized team of people devoted to indies, one led by Yoshida, Greg Rice, and others who are demonstrably passionate about small developers and games they make. Quote, they are constantly advocating for partnership opportunities as well as even without deals, ways to amplify and advocate for support within our channels, whether it be PlayStation Store or our content communications teams working on the blog or events and so forth, she says. I would say there are a lot more levers we have to pull to be able to support these creators, and there are a lot of tools being put in place to support the creators. It's much, much more evolved than when I started in 2017. So that's the entirety of this article. There was so much information in this article that I felt like trying to cut it up and make a video. It's at least content for, 2 or 3 different videos. So I wanted to just come on live and talk about it while I get a sip of coffee. Hold on. And I found it interesting because they highlight the differences between their approach. They don't look at console, PC, and VR as this large pool of people who all do the same thing or could be swayed into doing the same thing. Let's just go after all of them with the same approach, put all our eggs in one basket. They separate out these markets. They say, okay, PC is different. How can we engage there? Obviously, VR is different. How do we engage there? And obviously, console is different. How do we engage there? And instead of making that consumer all the same, what they do is they find ways to differentiate their products themselves for each market. So, for instance, with the console, when it comes to third party games are everywhere. Why are you going to buy a third-party game on the PlayStation 5 over the Xbox, especially if the game is in Game Pass? Let's say Wulong is out right now. That's in Game Pass. It's also on PlayStation 5. Why would you buy it on PlayStation 5? Well, they're saying, for them, they're going to try and work with third parties to highlight the differences in their console and the experiences. So they'll say to them, hey, you have all these different weapons in the game. What if these weapons felt different? What if you could actually feel the difference between a sword and a spear? Well, you can do that with the haptic feedback and the adaptive triggers. So maybe that would be a selling feature. And like I said, when third-party games come out and they utilize that DualSense controller, I'm all over it. Absolutely love it. Same thing with VR, right? There are a lot of VR headsets out there. Why would you buy a PlayStation VR 2 over something else? Well, they're saying look at their tech. Look at the exclusive features, not games, but features of their platform that could sell a third-party game. So with the VR headset, you get that foveated rendering, which is much better than other VR headsets, a higher resolution. You're getting haptic feedback, adaptive triggers. You're getting the rumble feature in the helmet itself. So there are a multitude of different ways that they can set themselves apart from other VR headsets, just like they can set themselves apart with third-party games on the PlayStation 5 with features like the DualSense controller or the SSD or any of a number of other things that they can do to market a game over someone else's game. And when it comes to PC, they're talking about doing things much different as well. So I liked this article. I liked the fact that it broke up all of these different segments of how they look at things. And I think some of them, cross over with Xbox. I think Microsoft is looking at Game Pass the way that Sony looks at the exclusivity features of their hardware as maybe selling a product or a third-party game to consumers, whereas Microsoft says, well, Game Pass will sell that game for us, because it's in this subscription service. And it's kind of the same approach. I like the approach of, I just like getting a piece of hardware that has unique features, and I like knowing that they're going to use those unique features. I'm more of a hardware guy. So if I have a piece of hardware like a PlayStation 5, I purchased it because they talked about that SSD. I purchased it because they talked about that DualSense controller and the haptic feedback and the adaptive triggers. And I purchased it before I even knew about, any current or future games coming to the platform, because I wanted to play those games and I wanted to experience them differently. Komanga, how you doing? He says, hey, Worry, what's up? Passive Profit, how you doing? He says, when devs use the DualSense right, it's a dream. That's something Forspoken did great. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that that's a Forspoken did great. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that that's a great example of what I'm talking about here. Forspoken as a game, I loved Forspoken. I thought it was a very good first step for a new IP. But I will say that if Forspoken was a multi-platform game, you'd have to play it on the PlayStation 5. Even if it was in Game Pass, it's a completely different game with that DualSense controller. And that's what I'm talking about. And that's what they're talking about in this article. You can take an audience and you can say, well, console gamers are just like PC gamers. PC gamers are just like VR gamers. They're all the same. Let's just market to them the same way. And they'll just buy all of our stuff, and they'll just be this crossover back and forth. They'll make all this money. But I think slowly as the generation goes on, people are learning, excuse me, that consumers are different. The consumers in the VR space expect something different than the consumers in the console space, and the consumers in the PC space expect something different than both of the others. Yes, there's crossover. Some people have consoles and VRs and PCs, but to a larger extent, most of the people that are spending their time on console and PC are very, very different. And VR is just this ancillary experience to the console now with PlayStation. Passive Profit says, exactly. You feel all 100 plus spell games definitely got buried for the wrong reasons. Rest in peace, Luminous. Well, Luminous got adopted into Square Enix, so I think the technology and that engine that they created, I think you're going to see them again. I don't think Forspoken is dead. I really don't. I think you're going to see Frey Holland again, because she's just a cool character and you can build a world around her. And they built such a fantastic story and cast of characters around her. And I think that Square is going to look at that and they're going to pump some money into that. And I hope that we'll see Frey again. Hold on while I take a sip of coffee. So like I was saying, I have a PlayStation VR 2. I purchased it because I knew that it had all of these extra features. If you're in the VR space and you want to play VR, I'm not a PC gamer. So who's offering me VR? PlayStation. If Microsoft offered it, I would buy it. Sony offered it. Not only do they offer it, but they said that there are features that you can't get anywhere else. And we're going to highlight those features in our games. And they're the ones doing it first with Horizon, Call of the Mountain. Later on in the generation, we'll get games that utilize it. Switchback is coming. The eye tracking is absolutely unbelievable. Let me get to this comment first. Passive Profit says, so much of that could be cleaned up in a sequel. They just really needed better storyboarding. Yeah. Hopefully it will come back in a sequel, because I thought the game was great. By the way, DLC is coming to the game. It's still coming. They're working on the game still. They released a statement saying after they were acquired or absorbed into Square that they were still fully committed to Forspoken, and the DLC is still coming. So with the VR headset, just like the DualSense controller, just like the PlayStation 5, and the article wasn't just a Sony article, even though it was pointing out and it was talking to somebody working at Sony. There's a lot you can take and you can sort of see Microsoft trying to do. But it's much more difficult because all of their eggs are in that Game Pass basket. And Game Pass isn't something that highlights the strength of a piece of hardware. They're not utilizing, the strengths, the technical prowess of the Xbox Series X for Game Pass or anything else. It's just a service. So the differentiating factor is you pay us $15 a month and you may be able to get games in here that the other guy will pay $60 for, $70 for. Whereas on the other side, you're getting features, you're getting the experience that the other guy can't get. So it really comes down to, do you want a holistic experience in a game? And I'll tell you again, like Forspoken was a good example. If Forspoken is in Game Pass, I'll still tell people, you're not playing Forspoken. You have to play it with that DualSense controller. There has to be that experience there because it goes hand in hand. To me, Forspoken isn't just that game that you play. It's the game that you play. It's all of those features from the DualSense controller, the haptics, and the adaptive triggers. Steady Flow says, hey, WorryWart, I'm there with you. I can't wait for Forspoken DLC this summer after the merger. I can't wait either. By the way, guys, I'm seeing your chats. I don't know how to work Streamlabs. I have no idea how to get your comments to appear on the screen here. I know you have to add the comments to a source. I did that. Mooch has told me how to do it. I've done it, and I still can't get it to work. So I apologize for that. I'll read them out, though, when I see them. Yeah. Take Resident Evil 4, okay? PSVR launched. Resident Evil Village in VR is an absolutely different experience than playing it on the console. It is so different that I would recommend it to anybody with PlayStation VR 2, right? So how do you get people to buy Resident Evil 4 Remake? It's coming out on PlayStation. It's coming out on Xbox. Well, they announced a free VR mode for Resident Evil 4. I have PlayStation VR 2. Why would I not buy Resident Evil 4 on PlayStation 5 now? Even if it was in Game Pass, I would have to buy it because of that extra experience that I'm getting. Steady Flow says, facts, the DualSense made Forspoken a better experience. That's what I'm talking about. And that's what this article talks about. She talks about, the different ways that they differentiate between other systems. And I think that those experiences, to me, right, this is my opinion, those experiences to me are better than having a game in a subscription service for $15 a month. The other problem that I have with that is, you forget about these games. They drop in there with so many other games that you don't even have time to digest it and say, okay, here's a big game coming out. Let me get into it. It just feels like it's there and then you move on. Komanga says, this may be a bit off topic, but Worry, have you got a whiff of the Starfield spat that PlayStation 5 gamers are supposedly mad that it's not coming to their platform? Yes. So I think what you're talking about is someone at Bethesda was asked in an interview, when was exclusivity with Xbox considered? And their answer was, it was never a consideration until after they were acquired by Xbox. So that's not me saying that. That's not Twitter saying that. That's not some warped community saying that. This is Bethesda saying that while they were developing Starfield, it was never a consideration for it to be an exclusive title, which means that it was coming to PlayStation, it was coming to Xbox, maybe at some point in time, even it would come to a Nintendo platform. They managed to get Elder Scrolls Skyrim running on the Switch, so anything is possible. And then, here's something that I think you're not talking about. There was another interview with Phil Spencer where he said there is no example in Bethesda of them taking games away from the PlayStation community. And clearly those two statements are at odds with each other. Bethesda saying it was never going to be an exclusive until the acquisition. Phil Spencer saying there's no example with Bethesda of them taking things away. Well, the example of that was actually given by Bethesda. They said there was no consideration of it being an exclusive title until Microsoft purchased them, versus Phil Spencer saying there's no example of us taking games away from PlayStation gamers with the Bethesda acquisition. So clearly both of those statements can't be true. So you either disagree with Bethesda or you disagree with Phil Spencer, or you agree with Phil Spencer or you disagree with Bethesda. Either way, you're disagreeing or agreeing with the same entity, which doesn't make any sense. Passive Profit says 100% Worry. I'd rather pay my ticket and get the bells and whistles. Steady Flow says, speak on it, 100. Passive Profit says, lies of P. Yeah, so, I mean, do I think it should be exclusive if they own the publisher? Yeah, why not? They paid the money. It's obviously going to be a game, hopefully, that's good. Maybe they recognize that, and they want that game to sell their systems. But that's the thing. Do you want to sell systems? Do you want to sell subscription services? Which one do you want to do? Because one month it's not even about systems, not even about consoles. It's about being everywhere. And if you want to be everywhere and you want to offer content to everyone, then why aren't you doing that with some games versus others? So when I see people complaining that Sony has these deals, Sony does that, you're right, they do. But here's something Sony doesn't do. Sony doesn't make all these deals. Sony doesn't have all these exclusives, first party, second party, third party. Sony doesn't do that and then say, we want everyone to experience more games. They don't do that. That's the distinction. Komanga says, Phil tripped on his own shoestrings with that statement. Yeah, you know, and to be fair, he's supposed to say stuff like that, but there should be people in place that, know about these comments from Bethesda and work that around his interview, because it really looked bad when Bethesda said, Starfield was in development and there was no consideration of it being an exclusive title until Microsoft purchased them. And then Phil Spencer saying there's 0 examples with the Bethesda acquisition of them taking games away, because their own company now essentially gave the example, and that's embarrassing. So that's the distinction. I get it. I get that they want exclusive titles, and after 21 years of being in the industry, they haven't done the work really that PlayStation's done to get these relationships, to form the relationships, to fund games, to take risks over time, and then purchase studios. So they're playing catch up. Finally now, they decided they want to be in the industry again, and they need to play catch up. So how do you play catch up? If you got a lot of money, you spend a lot of money, and that's what they're doing. So whether or not it works or doesn't work, I don't know. But I can tell you, as somebody who's been playing video games for over 40 years, I want experience. I don't care about $15 a month. I really don't like recurring fees. I don't like to be locked into something. Can't stand it. And I like the idea of a big launch. I like waiting for a game, purchasing it, and then playing it and digesting it and experiencing it. I don't like the idea of, here's a game and I'm playing it and this game drops and then that game drops and then this game drops and that game drops. I want to play video games. I want to play them, experience them, finish them, and I want experience over, I guess, I don't want to say over a value, because some people see $15 a month as value. To me, the value is the experience. And the better the experience, the better the value. Does that make sense? So the better the experience on a system. Let me see. Hold on. Passive Profit says, there's no way after all this time we should be looking at Xbox as some type of underdog. Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to be an underdog when, when I heard Microsoft say that, I thought, it's kind of like, can you imagine going out to a nightclub? All your friends are inside, and there's a bouncer at the door. And the bouncer is about 4 foot tall and weighs about 60 pounds, right? You're 6 foot tall, 250. Your friends call you on the phone and say, where are you? And you say, well, I'd really like to get in, but the bouncer's stopping me. And then they say, wait a minute. That guy that's 4 foot tall and 60 pounds is stopping you from getting in here? That's essentially what Microsoft said. They've essentially said that Sony is stopping us from competing in the industry. Well, think about this for a second. In an afternoon, you spent almost the entire market cap of that person that's keeping you from competing to buy Bethesda. So how in the world can you say that tiny little bouncer at the door is stopping you from competing when you can spend almost their entire net worth on one acquisition in cash in an afternoon? So it's not that Sony's stopping you from competing. It's just that you can't figure out how to compete. And the answer is to just make great content. You don't have to be 6'250" to make great games. You have to be talented. You have to have talent. You have to want to foster creativity. And that's something that they haven't done. So it was very interesting when I saw that comment, that we're the underdog, but I don't know how you can be an underdog when you can leverage that kind of cash in an industry. I don't know how you could be an underdog when you can essentially almost take the largest revenue driver in the industry, Call of Duty, and make it an exclusive title or own the publisher. So I just can't see how you're an underdog. You just got to get your act together and start making great content. Buying stuff is great, but making stuff is better. And it's a lot harder, which is why you're seeing them buy a lot versus make a lot. Any more comments? I don't see any. So, I found this article to be spot on. And I thought about, well, why aren't I personally buying or playing games through Game Pass? Because they're quote unquote free, even though I paid $15 a month. But why would I want to spend $70? Like, for instance, Atomic Heart. Atomic Heart's in Game Pass. I have it on PlayStation 5. Why? Well, not only, and I'm not one of these people who are like, well, it runs better. It's got a couple of extra lines of resolution or frame rate here or there. That's okay, great. But at the end of the day, you're not really noticing that too much if you're just playing a video game on your giant 70-inch 4K television. It still looks fantastic. But here are a few reasons. One, the experience is better. Right? To me, value isn't just money. The value for me is in the experience. And if the experience is better somewhere, I'll pay for it. The experience is better with Atomic Heart. It's actually an incomplete game on the Xbox. You're missing video files. As you play the game, there are these circular golden, whatever they are. They're like projector screens in the game. And you're supposed to see an image of someone speaking, and you don't see that in the Xbox version because it wasn't even included. Plus the haptic feedback, plus the adaptive triggers, plus the little speaker on that controller that makes it sound like you have like a walkie-talkie on your person, which is what it's supposed to be in the game, but they can't implement it on any other system but the PlayStation 5 because of that DualSense controller. Passive Profit says, at the end of the day, is Xbox really the best shepherd for these IPs? If they can't get it together with their flagships, you got to wonder. Value being the experience is a great way to put it. Yeah, it's interesting when you look at something like Halo Infinite. I mean, that's the biggest name that Xbox has. And if they had that much trouble with that, why is it going to be great when they own Call of Duty? Why is it going to be great owning Elder Scrolls or Starfield? How is Perfect Dark going to turn out if Halo turned out that way? These are all valuable questions. These are all good questions to ask. I don't think anybody... Let me give you another example. We know that Perfect Dark is coming from Microsoft, okay? We also know that Wolverine is coming from PlayStation. We know that Insomniac Games is doing Wolverine, and we know that I don't even know who's doing Perfect Dark. Is it Rare? Rare and someone else, Crystal Dynamics, I think, is doing Perfect Dark. Now, just based on that knowledge, what do you think, if you had to bet, was going to be a AAA, amazing, feature-complete game? And why do you think that? And it's because of the track record. Of course, it's going to be Wolverine and Insomniac. Passive Profit says value being, yeah. That's how I put it, man. I get some people might say, hey, $15 a month and I get to play Atomic Heart. It's a $70 game. I don't care. To me, that's value. Well, it is value, right? Subjectively, it's value because you're paying less money. So it's a value proposition. On the other hand, The reason why you buy a video game system is to experience things. So is the experience valuable also? Could the experience be more valuable than saving a couple of bucks if the experience is so much better? I think so. And it looks like many other people think so too, because look at the sales split between the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. Passive Profit says, the quadruple A studio that keeps losing people is doing Perfect Dark. Yeah, the Initiative, right? Yep, Komanga, the Initiative, and Crystal Dynamics. There's another thing, right? I hate to get into this, man. I wanted to talk about this article, and I did. Oh, man, that coffee's good. I'm drinking decaf these days, man. It sucks, but let me tell you, if you're used to drinking coffee, gotta have something. The Initiative. Another example. And this is why I was excited, and now I'm not excited. Quadruple A studio, hiring talent, the best talent from around the industry, and their job is to make quadruple A games. That's what they said. Now they're saying that they're really just a small group who thinks up ideas and then passes them along to other people. And you have people, the same people who were super excited about the Initiative. I'm one of them, right? I'm one of them. Super excited about the Initiative, quadruple A, and then you hear this news and they're like, oh yeah, that's what they always were. Well, that's not what you said. The same people who were saying they were quadruple A are now saying, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's what they always were. No, it's not. Come on, guys. Help me out here. They weren't supposed to be this small group of people that comes up with ideas and then finds other developers to help them. They were supposed to be able to create Last of Us level games internally from beginning to end. Of course, you hire out some things like, make this rock or make this bird or something like that. But the meat of the game is supposed to be made in-house. So I think it would have been that. I think it could have been that. Should have been that. But once the Game Pass ball started rolling, now it's about cost versus profit. Because you've got to have a certain amount of people in order to fund this thing, to keep it alive. It's almost like a Ponzi scheme. We need more people for more money so that we can pass that money to these other people while they do the work. And while those people who had the original money are waiting for the return, those games will come out and then they'll get their return and so forth and so on. It goes back and forth. So I feel like experience, and this is what this article talked about. It's about the experience over everything else. Muss is here, says, oh man, just joined, missed the start. You can just rewatch it when it's over. It was an article about, let me see, I'll read it again. I got to pull it back up. The article was entitled, what the fuck is it? Sony's third-party plan to make PlayStation the best place to play. They talk about PC, they talk about PSVR, they talk about console, they talk about how they move between each of those different areas, and they talk about what they think is more important, and it's experience. Experience is value. It's not just $15 a month is value. It's not just playing Atomic Heart for $15 versus $70 value. That is value, but some people value experience over money. For some people, paying for an experience is fine. I can go to Ground Round or Sizzler or Outback and get a steak, right? Right? Is she right? I know that's the popular answer, but I was there. I keep pulling up back to school references in my head. You can go to Outback and get a steak. Outback exists. It's very popular. It's everywhere. It's never going out of business. People go there all the time, right? You can. But you can also go to Gordon Ramsay. You can also go to the London, his restaurant in New York, and get a steak. I promise you, it's a different experience. The value is in the experience and the quality that that experience brings. Still in business, plenty of customers, steak. What's the difference there? One is money value, Outback, and one is experience value, Ramsey. I'm choosing the experience every time. Some people choose the money value. That's fine. The point is that just because one company sees value in money being less than, in terms of paying $70 versus $15, doesn't mean that every company has to do it like that. I'd rather have DualSense features. I'd rather have haptic, adaptive trigger features. I'd rather have VR features that you can't get anywhere else on any other VR headset. I like knowing that. I like the experience. I like the expectation of great content that's going to come to these different platforms. To me, that's the value. And I think that their strategy of pitching that, their strategy of saying, hey, you over there, you making this friggin' game called Resident Evil 4 remake? Yeah? How about you put some fucking adaptive trigger features in here? Haptic thingamajigs. You know what I mean? For the people over here. Aight, cuz. I like that. I can't wait for that. That sold me on Resident Evil 4 on the PlayStation. Coming to Xbox, Resident Evil 4. Probably going to look the same, play the same. Maybe it'll be a little bit better on the PlayStation 5. Recently, we've been seeing that with third-party games. But either way, you can buy it on Xbox. You can buy it on PlayStation. For me, guess what? Sony leveraging those features. Sony saying, you're going to get a free VR mode. I just burped when I said VR mode. You're going to get a free VR mode in Resident Evil 4 if you buy it on the PlayStation. So for me, I'm getting 2 games now. Talk about value. $70 for 2 games. One, the console version. One, the VR version. Isn't that a way to leverage your technology and your features? Isn't that a way to leverage experience over just paying less to get people to buy a game? Yes, of course it is. Passive Profit says, even my headphones, the Razer Kyra Pros, have haptic exclusives for PlayStation 5. They make the same headphones for Xbox without it. Great point. There are other products in the world that leverage experience over value money. When I say value, I want to be clear. There's money value and there's experience value. So your headphones, the value in those are the experience that you're getting. Somebody else can buy cheaper headphones and call it a value, but that experience is the value. So no problem paying more, right? Musk says, while Xbox has focused on money value, i.e., I love IE by the way, in other words, Game Pass, Sony has focused on experience value, i.e., great games based on narrative, well-built characters, super controller, 3D sound, VR. Exactly. You're going to pay more. You're going to go to Gordon Ramsay's steak. You're going to pay more for that steak. Why? Well, the experience there is going to be better than going to Outback. The value is going to be better because the cut of meat is much better than at Outback. So the experience you're paying for is better. But if you go to Outback, you're going to have a good time, right? Going to pay a lot less. That's value too. Which one do you want? For me, in an entertainment medium, because this is all, what's the word I'm looking for? This is all, you don't need to own a console. You choose to own one. It's not necessary. You're buying it for entertainment. So for me, if I'm buying it to be entertained, I want the best entertainment I can get. And if I have to pay for better entertainment, then I'll do it. If I have the same game across 2 platforms and one gives me more entertainment, more value, then I'll pay for it. Passive Profit says, VR alone, especially this iteration, gives it such a massive leg up. I hate that word, I'll pay what I gotta pay. Didn't buy a $500 box to start cheaping it. Excuse me. Exactly. Let me take a cup of coffee. Who takes a cup of coffee? Let me drink a sip of coffee. Right. You spent $500 on a system, but now you're upset that you got to pay $60 or $70 for a game. Okay, that's fine. I get it. Money's tight. Inflation. $15 a month for the promise or the hope that sometime, in some way, maybe that game that you wanted that was $70 will drop into Game Pass. Great. You see that as a value. Me personally, if I was worried about the $500 to begin with, I wouldn't have bought the console. And if I bought the console, then obviously I'm not worried about the $500. And if the experience on that system that I purchased for $500 is going to be unlocked by the platform holder, why the hell wouldn't I buy the game that does that? Why? That's like saying I want to go on a ride. Disneyland, they made a ride. It's fantastic, right? It's amazing. However, the ticket's $5 and you won't experience any of that stuff that we put in the game. Or you can pay $10 and experience that. I'm sure you'd have people like, give me the $5 ticket. I don't care. As long as the thing I'm sitting in moves back and forth and goes straight up and down, well, that's cool. People that pay $10 are like, oh, this ride was incredible. So that's my point. Value is subjective. There's value in experience, and I think that experience value trumps the cash value. That's all I'm trying to say. I think that the article demonstrates that when they talk about how they're differentiating between all of their platforms. I think when they talk about PC, they know the limitations there. And they know that most people there aren't console gamers. Take a look at some of the games on PlayStation that released on PC recently, like Returnal. Didn't really do well, but it did really well on the console. So it's different markets, different people, different mentalities, different price points, different spending habits, different expectations. When it comes to console, it's a very closed market, and people know what they want, and they want PlayStation. Now that Xbox isn't good, I have my Xbox Series X. I'm waiting for Starfield. I don't care that it's in Game Pass. I mean, my Game Pass expires in 5 days. So, I'll buy Starfield. Hopefully it's good. It's not going to be better just because it's in Game Pass. Games don't magically become better just because they're in a subscription service. That's another thing. If you weren't interested in a game, then it doesn't magically become better just because you're able to try it for $15 a month. Musk says, I have a few unused Game Pass codes stacked from discounts gathered over the years. My Xbox is still covered with dust. With current content on Game Pass, I have no interest to use the Xbox. Yeah, well, Wulong is out, right? I heard that that's like a Souls game for beginners. I'm not a big Souls fan, so maybe it's a little easier, a little bit more approachable. But again, which one do you want? Do you want the Wulong on the Xbox or the Wulong that uses adaptive triggers, haptic feedback, SSD, 3D audio on the PlayStation? You make your choice. One isn't necessarily better than the other. I happen to think that experience trumps the monetary value that you get by not paying full price. No problems paying for what I get. I grew up and the mantra was you get what you pay for. And I still believe that. You get what you pay for. Jesus, what's up, Worry? What's up, Jesus? How you doing? Thanks for stopping by. I can't believe it's almost been an hour and I've been streaming. I wanted to talk about just this one little article. Turns out I've been talking for almost an hour. It's incredible. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about. That article that talks about how they differentiate third-party deals, how they get people to maybe get interested in third-party games versus other platforms, even if those games are in a subscription service. I also wanted to touch on value and what that means. Value isn't just about money, paying less. It's also about experience. It's also about features that are utilized versus maybe something else that isn't utilizing them. Some people see value in that. I think that based on the choice that consumers are making right now when it comes to systems. PlayStation 5 is obviously the choice. So I think that approach to experience is winning out. Not to say that value in terms of spending less isn't great too for a certain segment of people. Passive Profit says, I appreciate the stream. I definitely show up if you do more. Yeah, the thing is I don't have time. Time is something that I don't have. Plus, I usually just make videos. And it's easier to do it like that. But with this one, it was just so much information. I needed to go live to talk about it. Must says, Worry, let's be honest. PlayStation has improved on experience with every new generation. Isn't that why Sony has kept and grown their user base? The experience has steadily become better. That's the thing, right? It's about experience. Now, when it comes to that experience, look at the PlayStation 3, right? $600 at launch for Blu-ray and all this stuff. Tons of experience in there. So you got to be careful too. And that's on the platform holder. They've got to be able to differentiate. They've got to be able to showcase new experiences, push forward new technology, but they've also got to be able to eat costs for a while. And Sony learned that lesson very well. They've also learned to put somebody in charge to make a system like Mark Cerny. After the PlayStation 3, they put him in charge of PlayStation 4. And of course, they put him in charge of PlayStation 5. And he will be in charge of PlayStation 6. So yes, I think value is in the experience versus paying less. Not that I don't think paying less is a good thing, but when it comes to a product that you don't need a console. You buy it because you want to play video games, because you want to experience things. Why would you buy something based on experiencing things and then limit your experience to them? Because you can pay $15 a month and forgo all of those additive features that PlayStation puts in those third-party games. That's all I'm saying. I like the idea of getting my money's worth, but not paying less when I know I could have a better experience with a product. I keep using the example of Atomic Heart, and I keep using the example of Resident Evil 4, which is going to be a huge game, but look what they did. Again, free PlayStation VR2 mode with Resident Evil 4. Well, I'm instantly buying it on PlayStation. Doesn't care. I don't care if it's $60 versus $70 on PlayStation 5. I wouldn't care if it was in Game Pass. I have to get it on the PlayStation because of that additive experience. Must says, now take Xbox. What has improved? Controller has stayed the same. The camera has been phased out with the previous generation. Previous good games have either gotten worse or just stopped producing. Yeah, I mean, they're on a very different path. Personally, I don't think that... I think that Microsoft and Xbox would be much better as a third-party publisher. I really do. They talk like a third-party publisher. They move like a third-party publisher. You know, they say if it looks like a pig and it sounds like a pig, it's a pig. And they look like a third-party publisher. They sound like a third-party publisher. So I think they're going to become a third-party publisher. Jesus says, that was very well put, Worry. Damn. Why do these people limit their own experience to the lowest standard possible just because it would be cheaper? Well, I mean, look, I get people don't have a lot of money. Some people don't have a lot of money, and I get it. And it's human nature to just say, well, the thing I have is the best thing because you want it to be. Very few people are objective like that. But a big part of all this nonsense that you're seeing with, Game Pass and who cares about features, who cares about experience, that's social media driven. A lot of these people that talk about games talk about them because you guys, I don't mean you guys in my chat, I just mean in general, they'll pay to ask questions, which is insane, like super chats. Or the more subscribers you have, the more monetization you can get. So, for instance, you can say really ridiculous things like Xbox or PlayStation sucks, and here's why Phil Spencer. People will tune in for that. You'll grow an audience, and you'll get tons of ad revenue. That's probably the biggest issue when it comes to this stuff. For instance, there are very few large YouTube channels that talk about games that talk about them the way I am. And there's a reason. I only have 550 subscribers. So I think if social media wasn't as prevalent as it is, you'd have probably much more intelligent conversations about this stuff. But at the end of the day, even with social media, the cream always rises to the top. Always. And consumers right now in the world, outside of social media, in social media, whatever you want to talk about, what are they choosing? They're choosing PlayStation 5 over the Xbox Series consoles. Period. That's not me being a fanatic. That's not you guys being fanatics. That's not me hating Xbox. That's just the truth. So no matter what, the cream always rises to the top. Passive Prophet says, Worry, where do you find this? Muzz says, I agree, third-party publisher is really good interpretation. Going to use that from now on. And Muzz says, Worry, in your opinion, what would Xbox need to compete to actually matter? Just make good games. They've got so much money that in 21 years, for them not to be able to say, identify a studio. Let's take Sony, for example. Sony early on identified Insomniac as being a really good developer. So what happens? They say, we would like to help create games with you because we like what you're doing. So if you're going to take some of our money, we would like you to utilize our hardware. So what do? Over time, they make games for PlayStation 2, right? Only. They're not making games for other platforms and all of a sudden they take them away. They're making games for PlayStation. PlayStation's taking the risk with them. That's important to remember. They're taking the risk with them. They're funding them. One game becomes 2 games, becomes 3 games, becomes 4 games. They get better and better and better. More importantly, critically, they do very well. Gamers love their games and purchase them. And then over time, that relationship fosters into something that yields results. We want to buy you. We want to purchase you. We want you to be a first party for PlayStation. And Insomniac says yes. For Microsoft in 21 years to not be able to have done that with at least one studio, they didn't do it with Bungie. They just purchased Bungie outright. They didn't have a relationship with them. They didn't purchase Epic. They just purchased Gears of War. For Microsoft in 21 years to not at least one time look around the industry, identify a developer and say, we like what you're doing. We would like to help develop things with you. We have ideas. We would like to give you some money. We would like you to utilize our hardware in new and exciting ways. 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, 4 games. And then all of a sudden say, our relationship is great. How about you come home? So that's Microsoft's fault for not doing that. That's what they need to do, in my opinion, to actually matter. Passive Profit says Xbox sold 18.5 million to PlayStation 5's 30 million. Xbox is niche. It's an accessory console after you have a device you actually want to play on. I don't know. I agree with you in terms of, obviously, consumers are choosing PlayStation over Xbox with 30 million to 18.5. But if another $500 accessory console is a bit much. I don't want to say the Switch is an accessory console because I think Nintendo is great, obviously. But I know a lot of people say that. A lot of people say that if you own a PlayStation and you own a Switch, you're good. Or if you own an Xbox and you own a Switch, you're good. So, who knows? Musk says, good points. Thanks for answering that question. Absolutely. Why wouldn't I answer the question? So we're at 1 hour and 4 minutes. I hit an all-time high here, people, of 10 viewers concurrent. We're on our way up. Pretty soon, we're going to be the de facto video game podcast God, I can't stand. You know what I can't stand? Dedicated podcasts. You guys like dedicated, like Xbox podcasts or PlayStation podcasts? It's kind of like knowing exactly what you're going to hear without even watching. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. Because what happens if Xbox goes away? What do you do then? You got to pivot to what? What happens if Apple buys Xbox? Are these hardcore Xbox podcasts all of a sudden going to love Apple? They're going to be tweeting. God, who's the guy at Apple? I don't even remember anymore. I forget his name. They're going to be tweeting him, hey, talk to me. Phil Spencer used to talk to me all the time. Now you're in charge. You talk to me. Please talk to me. I don't get it. Don't get it. Talk about games, play experiences, talk about them. And obviously right now, got to be honest, guys. Obviously right now, the experience, the excitement, the joy, the expectation is all on the PlayStation side and the Nintendo side. It's just there. Can it get better for Xbox? Yes. Will it? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how Call of Duty makes Xbox better because it was always there. It was actually better for them on the 360 when they paid for map packs. So I don't know. I don't know. Is Activision all of a sudden going to make great AAA brand new IPs? I don't know. But what I do know is that those type of games are still going to be created under PlayStation. That's what I know based on history. So I'm willing to throw my ball in that court. Passive Prophet says, I watch Xbox podcasts just to watch them damage control. Very guilty pleasure. The mental gymnastics and are impressive in their own right. Yeah, I guess. I don't want to get stuck. You know what I mean? If I made a channel about Xbox or PlayStation and all of a sudden they just sucked, what would I do? Must says, is there a spot for another contender in the console market? And Komanga says, be neutral. I love hearing your commentary on the video game industry. You're very sensible. The thing about being neutral is nobody is. I mean, you got to be older to be objective. And I'm objective. I know that what's the expression? You don't know what your shit smells like. I know what my shit smells like, and it smells like everyone else's. So the fact that I know that, I could sort of cut it out and be a little bit more objective. That's all it is. But, it's hard to be a true neutral. Like, I'm not from fucking Switzerland. But I like PlayStation right now because they're just killing it. I'm buying all my third parties on PlayStation now for the experience. I mean, that's not neutral. If Xbox starts doing things great, I'll play over there. But definitely have a preference. Spot for another contender. And that's another thing. People are screaming, oh, if Microsoft leaves, it's going to be bad for the industry. Listen, I've lived through multiple generations. I've seen consoles come, seen consoles go. Most notably Sega. What happened when Sega left? Well, somebody came into the industry and it was Xbox. So, no, I don't think it'll hurt the industry. As far as who can come in, I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't think Apple's interested in it. They make way too much money with Apple Arcade and mobile crap. I hate mobile games. I honestly don't know. Maybe Sega again. Who knows? I have no idea. But I just don't right now see Microsoft as being in the console space in 10 years from now. I just don't see that. I think that, it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, and it's probably a duck. And Microsoft looks like a third party and sounds like a third party developer, so they're probably going to be a third party developer. That's just how I see it. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to wrap up this impromptu podcast that was an hour and 10 minutes almost. Love the fact that I had some people pop in. Appreciate that. I read an article about Sony's third-party dealings and their strategy. at the beginning, which led to this discussion. So you go back and check that out. Passive Profit says, definitely off topic, but what's your favorite thing on the VR2 so far? You know, honestly, I love the kayak game. I don't know why. I think for me, VR is about putting you somewhere else. And in order to put you somewhere else, they have to really work on making it feel real and look real. And I think that's what that kayak VR game does. When you're in that one of those locations, I forget, Costa Rica, during the daytime, and you're just floating down that river into the ocean, you're there. I can't describe it other than to say that you are absolutely, positively there. It is fantastic. Jesus says, thanks for the content, Worry. Must says, thank you for the hangout. Going to turn on notifications so I can be there from the start. And Jesus says, keep it up, brother. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Passive Profit says, I really love the kayak. The Costa Rica jungle is crazy. That's what I was just talking about. It's incredible. I like Horizon, Call the Mountain. The one thing I don't like about Horizon is its over-reliance on climbing. All I've been doing is climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing, and then maybe a minute encounter with a bow and arrow, and then climbing again and climbing again. Jesus says, hop over to Jez's Grindhouse or Saltiest podcast, Worry. Always good to hear you. Hear your take. And Passive Profit says, if you haven't played Res Infinite and Village are amazing. I played the Resident Evil Village demo, and I'm absolutely sold. Picking it up as soon as possible. It was incredible. So there are a lot of great games, but in terms of just feeling like I'm in a virtual world, the kayak game, I think, does it best. But in terms of like experience and the creepiness, Resident Evil Village all the way. That's why Resident Evil 4 coming with a free PSVR 2 add-on is a no-brainer. Absolute no-brainer. Can't wait for that. All right, guys. Hour and 12 minutes. Thanks for coming. 12 people concurrently. We are on our way to being the de facto podcast in the community. The community. Oh, I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just old. That's what it is. So, thanks for coming in. Thanks for the comments. I appreciate it. Check out the channel if you will. This is the part where I do what YouTubers do, right? Please subscribe to my channel, guys. We're going to have all kinds of stuff in the future. Probably not, but I'll do my best. And that's it. I don't know when I'll do one of these again. Hopefully I can get a regular schedule going. It would be nice to be able to do these because making videos is fun, but sometimes there's just too much information to make one video. And I wanted to talk about all of it in one sitting. So I appreciate it. Thanks for watching, guys. And I will see you all in the next video or the next impromptu podcast. Must says, hit the thumbs up. Yeah, I forgot to say that. Isn't that what everybody says? Hit the thumbs up button. That and the like, right? Hit the like button. It's so important. Like it. I need 100 likes before I can talk to you. Need 100 likes before I can answer questions. Nah, I appreciate it, though. Victor Alston says, nah, don't go to Jez or Salty. Do your own thing. Okay. Well, I mean, I pretty much do my own thing anyway. And I'm not getting many invites to podcasts, so what are you going to do? All right, guys. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. And I will see you all in the next